I'm Steve Wiggins, and this is the Groundworks Ministries podcast. Today we're reading from the book of Leviticus, chapter 27, and let's focus on verse 34. And these are the commands the Lord gave Moses for the Israelites on Mount Sinai. Now, many years ago, when I first read through the Torah, the first 5 books of the Old Testament, I was shocked to learn that God gave Moses more than 10 commandments. Now, throughout the Torah, God gave 613 commands to be exact. These are not the commands of men, these are from God Himself. So the 10 commandments then act as overriding principles which govern the remaining 603 commands. Now, these 603 act as practical or situational guides, teaching Israel how to honor God in day-to-day life, how to live out the 10 commandments in every situation. Now, in religious Orthodox Judaism, several literary sources are drawn from. First, there is the Torah. There's what they call the Haftorah, also known as the Law and the Prophets, also known as the Tanakh, or as we call it, the Old Testament. These are the divinely inspired scriptures. Now, in Matthew chapter 5, Jesus taught the Sermon on the Mount, and consider His words in verses 17 through 19. Don't assume that I came to destroy the law or the prophets. I did not come to destroy, but to fulfill. For I assure you, until heaven and earth pass away, not the smallest letter shall pass from the law, until all things are accomplished. Therefore, everyone who breaks one of the least of these commandments and teaches people to do so will be called the least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever practices and teaches these commandments will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. Matthew 5, verses 17 through 19. In addition to the Old Testament, there are other Jewish literary sources. There's one they call the Mishnah, and there's another called the Gemara. And together they form what is known as the Talmud. And then there's also mystical writings, which are known as Kabbalah, or some people say Kabbalah. These are all volumes of rabbinical teachings and rabbis' interpretations of the Old Testament. Now, to frame it in Christian culture, imagine the greatest hits of the sermons of renowned pastors, men like D.L. Moody or C.H. Spurgeon or Wesley or Calvin, etc. And imagine that they were all put into volumes. Well, that's basically what these extra biblical volumes are in Judaism. They are collected rabbinic commentaries on the Word of the Lord. The problem that rabbinic Judaism faces is that so much of its religious practices in our day are based on the teachings of men. For instance, most rabbis will spend the majority of their studies buried in the commentaries of revered rabbis throughout history instead of buried in the Torah itself, the Word. And the reason that I challenge you, along with myself, to diligently read the Bible and to be in it every day is because the church tends to have the same problem as non-Messianic Jews have. Christians have a tendency to elevate the teachers, sometimes even above the scriptures. Paul addressed this very problem even in the early church. It's not a new thing. 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verses 11 through 13. For it has been declared to me concerning you, my brothers, that those of Chloe's household, that there are contentions among you. And now I say this, that each of you says, well, I'm of Paul, or I'm of Apollos, or I'm of Cephas, or I'm of Christ. Well, is Christ divided? Was Paul crucified for you? Or were you baptized into the name of Paul? We should study the Bible so that we can weigh the value of biblical teaching, instead of studying the Bible teachers in order to weigh the truth of the Bible. I'm Steve Wiggins, and this is the Groundworks Ministries podcast. Check us out at www.groundworksministries.com.